We burned the garlic and told the truth. On the nights I closed the restaurant alone, the hood fan sounded like a confession whispered into a coat. My name is Raphael, but everyone in the kitchen called me Rafa because syllables get trimmed when the ticket rail is full. I was the chef de cuisine at a place called Second Sun, a narrow dining room with mismatched bentwood chairs and a ceiling that had never forgiven the previous owner for smoking. The man I loved was Eli, a ceramics artist who threw bowls in the afternoons and poured wine at a small gallery at night. We lived over a nail salon that smelled like holidays and acetone and possibility. On our fridge, we taped an index card. Be home when you say. Don't rehearse breakups. Kiss before you sleep. We didn't write anything about VIPs, critics, or the way hands become language when people are hungry. Second Son ran on ambition, and a line cook named Mo who could build a salad like a thesis. Our owner, Cass, had eyes that could balance a P and L with a glance and a laugh that made investors believe in dessert. She told me the night would be soft Vips, a blogger with more followers than quiet and a venture capitalist who liked to back experiences. I heard rent, because rent is the god every restaurant prays to. Our sous chef, Silas, arrived at 4, sleeves rolled, a tattooed compass remembering a better map. He was the only person I knew who could smoke outside and come back smelling like rosemary. He was also the sort of man whose wrists made you think about grammar. I pretended not to notice that part. Eli came by before service as he did when a kiln cooled and he needed a room with stainless steel and swearing to make him feel directional. He brought a bowl still warm and a kiss that tasted like pears. For the new crudo, he said, setting the bowl down like a small ceremony. He slid an arm around my waist and fit his chin to my shoulder. The hood fan swallowed our quiet. Soft VIPs, he asked. I nodded. I'll be at the gallery until 11, he said. Be boring without me, I promised. It felt like a word I had earned. The venture capitalist was named Quinn, tall, trim, the kind of man who moved a chair with 2 fingers and a schedule with emails. He arrived with a woman whose smile did not believe in sugar, and a son none of us were supposed to notice. He looked around the room and I watched him catalog the wood, the light, the sound of forks like a man creating a deck. He asked to see the kitchen. I said after, because service is an instrument and you don't tune it in front of people you want to fund it. The blogger, Tessa, took photographs of our aprons and a paragraph of my face. She said our anchovy butter tasted sincere, which is either praise or flirtation depending on the angle. Silas found a way to plate on the new bowl that made the fish look like it had chosen to be delicious. He moved with the kind of economy that makes a man beautiful without his consent. When he brushed past me on the line, the back of his hand met my hip as if physics had chosen a side. I did not step away. That was the first mistake. The second was wanting to repeat it. Intrigue entered the room disguised as heat. The ticket rail filled with good intentions. Mo whispered behind like he owned the word. I clocked the VIP table tasting their way through our menu like they had decided to own our rent. Tessa laughed at something Quinn said in a low voice, her camera on the table like a truce. We were on course 4 when Silas leaned in to whisper, "We're out of fennel," and his breath touched the corner of my mouth. I said, "Use celery and lie," and he smiled in the short way that can rescue a shift. Our hands found the same spoon in the same pan and stayed there long enough for the garlic to brown more than the recipe likes. We burned the garlic, that was honest. After service, when the dishwashers sang their dishwater songs and Cass counted cash at the bar with her left eyebrow, Silas and I took inventory. He wrote numbers on a clipboard like they offended him. We were alone next to the walk-in, the sort of privacy kitchens offer to people who haven't yet decided who they are tonight. "Your anchovy butter is sincere," he said, mocking the blogger softly. "Sincere is rude," I said. We laughed like men who had survived something and were thinking about rewarding themselves. He put the clipboard down, and in that space we leaned. The kiss tasted like citrus and impatience. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It fit like a knife slot. We stopped because the swing door breathed and a busser walked by with a mop like a conductor with a baton, and we remembered we were practiced at restraint. Eli called as I walked home. "How was boring?" he asked. I told him the truth that saved me. We burned the garlic and the VIPs ate everything. I didn't mention the kiss because I didn't know if it was a symptom or a diagnosis. He said, "Come home." I said, "I'm almost there." The nail salon was dark. The hallway light clicked on a beat late with its usual drama. Eli met me with a bowl of grapes that had learned seduction in better kitchens and a mouth I'd chosen. We kissed against the counter like men who deserved one boring thing. We went to bed and he put his hand on the back of my neck, and I fell asleep because sometimes love is just the permission to drop. Quinn sent an email the next morning via Cass that read like money rehearsing. Dinner thrilling, concept promising, would like to discuss a pop-up series to test markets. Cass floated into the kitchen with eyes like a dividend. He wants a supper club, she said. Off-site, secret, test and tell. She asked if Silas and I could build a menu that behaved dangerously on purpose. I said yes before thinking. Silas looked at me in a way that made me revise the meaning of collaboration. Eli texted a photo of a cup he'd just pulled from the kiln. Thumbprint on the rim, the kind of flaw that turns into a signature if you're stubborn. Nice, I replied, and meant it like you mean rain. We held the first supper club in a decommissioned printing house that maintained a relationship with dust. Quinn invited 9 people no one admits to admiring and instructed them to arrive by back alley, as if desire were illegal. Silas and I cooked 70s hotel classics like they'd gone to therapy. Prawn cocktail served in blown glass bowls Eli lent us. Steak au poivre with green peppercorns that had learned better manners. A baked Alaska that refused to apologize for itself. Quinn stood in the corner with a whiskey and watched both rooms, theirs and ours, like he had invested in gravity. We were high on adrenaline and compliments when we kissed the second time, between the lowboy and the door with a lock that believed in its job. It was quick, an admission with manners. "We shouldn't," I said, inventing ethics to taste. "We should not," he agreed, and we both hid behind the grammar like it could keep our names clean. Eli came to the second supper club to photograph the plates. He is very good at capturing a sauce like light you can eat. He stood on a stool at one point and looked down and said, "That needs more shadow," and I thought, I love this man in all the present tenses. Silas watched him work with that quiet he wears when learning who he might one day become. On the walk home, Eli said, "You looked happy." I said, "I was performing competence." He squeezed my hand. "You're allowed." The third supper club had a theme, VII sins spelled in a font that made even shame look modern. The menu asked for flirtation. The guest list arrived with 2 critics I'd grown up pretending not to seek. We cooked like men who knew we would be remembered incorrectly. In the alley afterward, Quinn leaned against a pallet like a man considering the moral discount. "The pop-ups will be a brand," he said. "Then a location. Then a neighborhood. Then the world. You could lead it." He said it to both of us, which was cowardly and effective. Silas's shoulder touched mine as if this were physics. I nodded as if I believed in ascendancy. When the rumor reached Eli that a critic had called me reckless and tender, he laughed and nudged me with his knee in bed like good luck is a shared thing. I told him about the brand pitch as if it were a weather forecast. He asked if I wanted to be a brand. I said I wanted to pay rent without bargaining with the basil. He kissed my knuckles and said, "You're allowed that too." The night I told Eli about the kisses, the garlic burned again because honesty was learning how to sauté. I said it in the living room where our plant had accepted it was not here to thrive. He listened with his thumb on my wrist, counting the truth like a pulse. He asked the question careful men ask, "Is this who you want to be or who you were when you were tired?" I said I didn't know. He nodded like he didn't need me to be impressive to be worth the bowls he made. "Be small with me," he said. We made love like a quiet untying. He put his mouth on the part of me that forgives first. I said yes into his neck because agreements need places to live. Silas asked me if we were going to confess to Cass. "About the brand," I said. "About us," he said, and I hated how good he was at plurals. I said we'd be disciplined. He grinned in that way bright men do when they are about to start a controlled fire. We kept our distance for a week that felt like trying to teach your hands a new job. The health inspector arrived the morning the blogger posted Second Son's Secret Sins, which included a photo of our pop-up dessert with a caption about danger, and one of Quinn with his whiskey smile, and a paragraph about how kitchens kiss in corners. The inspector found a cutting board stored upright, and a thermometer that didn't calibrate on command, and wrote us a B like a prophecy. Cass went sheet white in a way that made me remember why I loved her and hated the city. We quarantined the pop-ups. Quinn texted me a sentence that tasted like panic: "We proceed or we die." I texted back, "We proceed slower." When things go wrong in restaurants, people kiss more or less. We chose less. Silas stopped letting his hands be a language. He clocked out on time with the precision of a person who wants not to be read. I cooked like competence could be punishment. Eli made bowls with high shoulders and poured wine for quiet men who said interesting when they meant sad. We seemed fine. We were performing the be home when you say part of the card like it paid us. Then Quinn set a meeting at a place with sad cocktails and said, "I'll front the fines, the reinspection, the PR. In exchange, I want the name and 51% of the pop-up brand. You'll run it, Rafa. We'll franchise a feeling." His teeth looked good in the backlight. Silas stared at the table like it was doing algebra. Cass folded her hands like a parachute. I said, "I'm not franchising what happens when a door almost locks." Quinn said, "This is business." Silas said, "This is us." The word us was a mistake and a mercy. Cass blinked. She knows how to read. After, in the alley behind Second Son, Silas kissed me like you say goodbye in a language you learned as an adult. He said, "You chose right." I said, "I chose small." He nodded, brave, and stepped back into the light that made his compass tattoo look like a decision he could keep. He didn't come to work the next day. He texted Cass a thank you and me a heart that felt like a period. We clawed our way back to an A. The reinspection was a week of humility and bleach. Mo sang hymns to the sanitizer bucket. Cass bought us new thermometers and a speech therapist for our guilt. The blogger moved on to a pasta place that staged a breakup on TikTok. Quinn invested in a bar where the bartenders have bangs. Silas opened a pop-up in a borrowed space with a name that made people feel invited. I went there on a night Eli was teaching a glazing class and ate a plate of carrots that tasted like forgiveness. At home, the index card stayed taped to the fridge, curling at the edges from the exhale of our lives. We kept the rules small. We kissed before we slept. We let hands be language only for each other. The erotic parts turned into trust, which is the only thing I've found that lasts past the part where hunger pretends to be virtue. Sometimes Eli would slide a new bowl onto the counter, a shape that made soup feel brave, and watch me fill it with what the market gave us. He'd put his mouth to my shoulder and ask here, and I'd say yes, and our boring would feel like a religion we built ourselves. Second Son learned to ignore VIPs. We said no to a brand and yes to paying rent with honest specials. Tessa came back and called our anchovy butter stubborn. She meant it kindly. Cass raised wages and bought Mo knives that stayed faithful. We burned the garlic sometimes because kitchens remind you who you are. When we did, I'd smile and say, "Truth, on," and Eli, if he was at the end of the bar, would lift his glass, water, wine, something deserving, and nod like a man who made a bowl that could hold it. If you asked me where the infidelity ended and the intrigue began, I'd say they were never separate courses, just different seasonings. We served both and survived the check. We held hands on the walk home. We told the truth where we could and forgave the rest where we had to. We kissed in the kitchen with the hood fan on, and sometimes we burned the garlic, because love, like heat, makes everything honest if you leave it on long enough.